Sapiens. Today I'm going to talk to you about the central method in sociocultural anthropology, participant observation. So I introduced this concept back in episode 2 because participant observation, along with being a key method, is one of the central tenets of anthropology, demonstrating the discipline's commitment to empathy and nuance. Today, though, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of participant observation, not only in physical spaces, but also in imagined and dysphoric communities. When we talk about participant observation, the name that generally comes to mind is that of Bronislaw Malinowski. In 1914, Malinowski set off from the London School of Economics in England to do field work in Papua New Guinea and the Trobriand Islands. At the time, this was a British-controlled area. While he was there, the First World War broke out, and because Malinowski was Polish and a subject of Austria-Hungary, he was not permitted to return to Europe. This extended his stay in the field indefinitely. But Malinowski made the most of his stay, developing a methodological approach to the study of culture and society, and cementing the method of participant observation that anthropologists still use today. To quote Malinowski, the anthropologist must relinquish his comfortable position on the lounge chair on the veranda of the missionary compound, the government station, or the planter's bungalow, where, armed with a pencil and notebook, and at times a whiskey and soda, he has become accustomed to collect statements from his informants. He must go out into the villages and see the natives at work in the gardens, on the beach, in the jungle. He must sail with them to distant sandbanks and to foreign tribes. Hence, we often say it was Malinowski that brought anthropology off the veranda and out of the armchair. Oh, that must mean that it's time for our tea time chat. So the thing is, while Malinowski is revered, for his methodological innovation, he's not without controversy. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So you see, years after his death, Malinowski's widow published his diaries from the time that he was working in the Trobriand Islands. These diaries revealed Malinowski to be, in the words of famous anthropologist Clifford Geertz, a crabbed, self-preoccupied, hypochondriacal narcissist whose fellow feeling for the people he lived with was limited in the extreme. This was shocking, considering how participant observation is all about understanding and empathizing with the lived experiences of the people you study. The diaries, they were deeply personal, and they revealed Malinowski's personal prejudices against his interlocutors, the people he studied. Malinowski intended his diaries to be brutally honest, as a means of self-analysis, but he never intended them to become public. While controversial, and certainly placing a stain on the father of social anthropology, the diaries now hold an important place as anthropological texts and have allowed future anthropologists to be more reflexive about their own work. History aside, though, what actually is participant observation? Let's break it down into its two parts. First, there is observation, which we can define as the action or process of observing something or someone carefully in order to gain information. Observation is an important part of the scientific process and is used in many disciplines, from biology to psychology to chemistry. But because anthropologists study humans with our complex lives and tendencies to represent ourselves differently, or at least more simply than how we may actually be, anthropologists add in this participant aspect. To be a participant, of course, means a person who takes part in something. When we put those two activities together, we get participant observation. In other words, anthropologists take an active part in the lives of the people they study, while at the same time making observations about these events and activities, being aware of what they mean to the participants, which also includes themselves. So, to remind ourselves of the exact definition of participant observation from back a couple episodes ago, it is a qualitative research method in which the researcher not only observes the research participants, but also actively engages in their daily activities. Participant observation is both a humanistic and a scientific method. It allows anthropologists to gain experiential knowledge. This grants them the ability to speak convincingly on a topic. But it also produces the kind of effective, positivistic knowledge that policymakers demand, contributing to solving some of the world's greatest problems. It is a method that can be used to collect both qualitative and quantitative data. In his book on anthropological methods, Russell Bernard speaks about the stages of participant observation, which he breaks down into 7 parts. First comes initial contact, which he describes as being usually euphoric, but which can also be terrifying. Then, within the first few weeks, anthropologists will experience something called culture shock. So culture shock is an uncomfortable stress response, and it can be quite serious. So in extreme cases of culture shock, just nothing seems right. Little annoyances can feel extremely upsetting, even things that just are slightly different from how you would experience them back at home. So ultimately, while culture shock doesn't entirely go away for most researchers, coping with these changes becomes easier over time. Things might still annoy you, but you're able to successfully do your work. The third stage is what Bernard calls discovering the obvious, where the researchers settle into collecting data on a systemic basis and often feel a sense of discovery. Bernard warns that this leads to taking on too much and burning yourself out. So the next step is a break, which allows your participants to have a chance to have a break from your presence, as well as allowing yourself to rest. After the break, you'll have a better idea of exactly what kind of data you're lacking, and your sense of the research problem will also come more sharply into focus. And this may change some aspects of your research design. Something that is totally and completely normal and okay to do. Humans are tricky, and studying them can screw up even the most well thought out research designs. The 6th stage then is exhaustion, where the researcher feels awkward asking their participants more questions, or they might wrongly feel that they've learned all they can. This necessitates a second break, following which you become more aware of all the information you have yet to learn, and this can lead to sort of frantic activity. The final stage is then leaving the field, though some researchers never have a permanent leaving stage. Bernard advises that you make sure to leave the field in a culturally appropriate fashion and leave people ready to accept both you and future researchers back. But before even heading out to the field, anthropologists must gain some skills in order to prepare for participant observation. Along with those more obvious skills, like the ability to take good field notes, and learning the local language, of course, anthropologists also need to learn to maintain their naivete and just be skilled at hanging out. After all, there's a lot people won't tell you until you have their trust and friendship. This is a process we call gaining rapport. But let's talk about the first skill for a minute, being naive. In anthropological fieldwork, the art of simply being stupid can be very important. Going into the field, you are often walking away from academia, where you're used to being the expert, the one in the know. But in the field, you're not. You are there to learn from your research participants and interlocutors. You are the student. While it's often not difficult to be naive when you enter a cultural setting that's very different from your own, this skill might be trickier when you are studying an aspect of your own culture or society, like I do. Regardless of the setting, being naive allows you to take in the ordinary and the mundane as something new, meaningful, and important, and then to sit back and intellectualize about even the seemingly dull events. Don't forget though, as always, this is nuanced. Being stupid doesn't apply when it could harm your interlocutors, or when you need to be an expert in order to gain rapport. For example, if you were studying the culture of nuclear scientists. Connected to this concept of being naive is the ability to switch between an emic and an etic perspective. In anthropology, the ability to take on and understand diverse perspectives is very important. We call the outsider view the etic perspective and the insider view an emic perspective. during participant observation, anthropologists try to adopt and understand the emic perspective. But then when they go and write up their fieldwork and introduce theories, they take a step back and start to introduce etic perspectives. Both are important, but both must be balanced. Too much etic perspective can result in ethnocentrism, where we judge practices unfairly by our own cultural standards. However, too much emic perspective, and you can run into relativistic fallacy. This is when we accept problematic things in another culture when we really should not, or simply making your work inaccessible to people outside the culture you were studying. But why do anthropologists do participant observation? Couldn't we just carefully watch the people we wish to study without getting involved? Doesn't getting involved affect the research in unpredictable ways? And what happened to scientific objectivism? These are all important questions, and ones that anthropologists have been grappling with for a long time. First of all, participant observation is not the only method used by sociocultural anthropologists in their studies. Some of the techniques that they might use include documentary filmmaking. Some incorporate artistic techniques, such as having their participants draw something or interpreting a piece of art. Others might investigate archives and historical accounts. And of course, interviews, both structured, semi-structured, or just completely open interviews, are often used either on their own or in conjunction with participant observation. And none of these are lesser forms of anthropology. This is particularly important to recognize given that the current state of the COVID-19 pandemic makes it impossible for many anthropologists to conduct participant observation physically among their research participants right now. However, there are a number of reasons why participant observation is an important anthropological method. When you observe a phenomenon, you change it. This is true in the natural sciences, but it is particularly obvious when you consider how humans might react to being watched. In order to understand how people actually live their daily lives, and not simply how they live them under the constant eye of the observing anthropologist, participant observation takes these changes deliberately into the method. Hanging out and gaining rapport with people will hopefully allow them to be comfortable acting just naturally around you. Finally, as hopefully has come out throughout this episode, participant observation allows you to gain knowledge through experience and to better understand and empathize with people's lived experiences, creating invaluably rich knowledge. Now, next time we'll be diving into the nature-nurture debate, so I'll see you then, and don't forget to go make the world safe for human differences.